sometimes God breaks your heart to save your soul. Strange, isn't it? You thought that relationship would last forever. You believed that job was your big break. You were sure this time your plans would finally work out. But suddenly, everything falls apart, and you're left staring at the broken pieces, asking, "Why, God? Why now? Why me?" We've all been there, confused, disappointed, and heartbroken. It's in those quiet, painful moments when you feel forgotten, overlooked, and even punished. But what if I told you that this is not the end? What if I told you that the mess you're in today is the first chapter of a better story, one that God is already writing for you? You see, just because things didn't go the way you expected doesn't mean they're not going the way they're supposed to. God's plan is not just bigger, it's wiser, deeper, and far more beautiful than anything you could ever imagine. But here's the catch. You won't always see it while you're in the storm. In fact, sometimes the storm is the very thing that moves you toward His purpose. This video isn't just another motivational talk. It's a message of hope for the broken, the disappointed, and the waiting hearts. If you've ever felt like your life is off track, that nothing is working out, or that maybe God forgot about you, then this is for you. Because the truth is, God never stopped working. He never left your side. He's just not finished yet. So stay with me, and let's take this journey together. Let's explore the deeper reasons behind life's unexpected turns, and let's remind ourselves of this one powerful truth. God has a better story for you, and it's still being written. Part 1, When Life Doesn't Go as Planned. Have you ever made a plan, gave it your all, stayed hopeful, prayed hard, and still watched it fall apart? Maybe you had your eyes set on that dream college, that perfect job, that person you thought you'd spend your life with. You told yourself, "This is it. This is what I was meant to do. This is who I'm meant to be with." But somehow, nothing worked out the way you imagined, and you were left with a heart full of questions and a life full of disappointments. It hurts. It really does. Because you didn't expect it to end this way. You believed with all your heart. You tried your best. You waited patiently. You had faith. And still, the answer was no. Now, let me ask you something. What did you do next? Did you cry silently in the dark when no one was watching? Did you start questioning your worth? Did you wonder if God had forgotten about you? You're not alone. Thousands of people walk through this same confusion every single day. We look around and see others getting what we prayed for. They're getting married, getting promoted, living the life we once pictured for ourselves. And we begin to ask, God, why not me? Am I not good enough? Didn't I trust you? Didn't I wait? You see, it's in this gap between what we expected and what actually happened, where doubt is born. And in that doubt, it becomes so easy to forget the most important truth. Just because your story didn't go the way you wrote it, doesn't mean God isn't still the author. Think about that. A good author doesn't just write a happy beginning and ending. They build tension. They introduce setbacks. They create suspense. Why? Because without the struggle, the story wouldn't be worth telling. God is doing the same with your life. That heartbreak? It's not the ending. It's the plot twist. That job rejection? It's not your failure. It's a redirection. That friend who walked away? Maybe they were never meant to be part of the next chapter. Sometimes God doesn't fix what's breaking. Instead, He allows it to fall apart, so He can rebuild it better, stronger, and more aligned with His purpose for your life. Let's take a real example. There was a young woman named Olivia who had been dating her college sweetheart for 5 years. Everyone around them believed they were going to get married. They talked about future plans, family, everything. One day, out of nowhere, he ended the relationship. No warning, no big reason, just gone. Olivia was devastated. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. She thought her life was over. But fast forward 3 years, Sarah landed her dream job in a city she never imagined living in. She met someone new, someone kind, stable, and more in tune with her purpose. She began volunteering, speaking, helping others through heartbreak. Looking back, she said something powerful. If I had married the person I once begged God to give back, I would have missed the person He actually prepared for me. And that's the truth, isn't it? Sometimes we pray for something so hard, thinking it's right for us, but God, in His wisdom, says, no, because I have better. And here's the hard part. Most of the time, we don't see that better immediately. Sometimes it takes months, sometimes years. And in the waiting, it's easy to believe the lie that your life is broken beyond repair. But that's the enemy's voice. God's voice says, I'm still here. I know it hurts, but I'm working. Keep trusting. You don't see the whole picture yet. Think about a puzzle. When you dump all the pieces on the table, it looks like a mess. Nothing makes sense. But the creator of the puzzle already knows what the finished picture will look like. He just needs time to put all the pieces together. That's what God is doing with your life right now. You may feel like nothing is fitting. You may feel like everything is scattered. But God is patiently building something beautiful behind the scenes. A life that's not only good, but better than anything you could have imagined. And I know, that's hard to believe when you're sitting in the dark, when your heart is heavy, and when your prayers seem to go unanswered. But listen closely. Unanswered prayers are not ignored prayers. They are sometimes the greatest acts of love. Imagine this. You're about to walk into a burning building, and someone who loves you grabs your hand and says, "Don't go." You might be angry in that moment. You might think they're holding you back. But later, you realize they saved your life. That's what God does when He closes doors we wanted so badly to open. He sees the fire we can't. He sees the heartbreak, the betrayal, the emptiness hiding behind what we think is perfect. God's no is never cruel. It's careful. It's protective. It's purposeful. Maybe you're listening to this right now, and you're still in pain. You still don't understand why it happened. That's okay. You don't have to understand everything today. You just have to trust the one who does. You're not too late. You're not forgotten. And your best days are not behind you. They're still waiting ahead. You don't need to rewrite your story. You need to surrender the pen, because the moment you let go of your version, you make space for God's better one to begin. So take a deep breath, wipe those tears, and hold on. This is not the end. This is just the beginning of a better story. Part 2. God's silence is not his absence. You know what's harder than hearing no from God? Hearing nothing at all. No signs, no answers, no direction, just silence. And in that silence, the mind races. Did God forget me? Did I mess up too badly? Am I even worthy of a miracle anymore? Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, praying, waiting, staying faithful, but nothing in your life was changing? That kind of silence is heavy. It can feel like rejection, like being abandoned by the very one you trusted most. But here's the truth that most people miss. God's silence is not his absence, it's preparation. Let me tell you about someone you've probably heard of, Oprah Winfrey. Before she became one of the most influential women in the world, she went through a period of deep pain and silence. She was fired from her first job as a TV news anchor in Baltimore. They told her she was unfit for television. Imagine hearing that, and then facing silence. No job offers, no breakthroughs, no obvious future. She could have given up, but she didn't. Years later, she looked back and said, I had no idea then that the path I wanted wasn't the one I needed. God had a bigger stage for me, I just didn't know it yet. In the moment of her silence, she thought she was being punished. But in reality, she was being positioned. And maybe you are too. There's another name you probably know well, Steve Harvey. Before he became a famous comedian, actor, and talk show host, Steve lived in his car for 3 years. He had no money, no home, and barely any food. He would clean himself up in gas station bathrooms before auditions. Every night he'd pray, asking God, why am I still here? When is it going to happen for me? But in the silence, something else was happening. God was building his character, his patience, his resilience. God wasn't denying his dream. He was developing the man who could carry that dream with humility. Fast forward, and now millions have been inspired by Steve's journey. Not just because of where he ended up, but because of how far he came from. So if you're sitting in the middle of a long, painful silence right now, don't confuse it with absence. You're not being ignored. You're being shaped. Here's what we often forget. Silence is where the most powerful transformation takes place. When a seed is buried underground, it's completely surrounded by darkness. No one sees it. It doesn't look like it's growing. But under that soil, something is happening. Roots are forming. Strength is building. And when the time is right, it breaks through the surface, stronger, firmer, and ready for the light. That's you. God didn't bury you. He planted you. And like any wise gardener, he knows when to water, when to prune, and when to wait. His timing is not rushed, because he's not interested in just giving you a good life. He wants to give you a meaningful one with depth, with purpose, with strength. Let's talk about another American icon, Tyler Perry. Did you know his first play failed miserably? He put everything he had into it. Money, hope, energy. On opening night, only 30 people showed up. The doors were nearly shut forever. But instead of quitting, he trusted the silence. He kept going. He kept writing, kept believing. Now, his production company owns one of the largest film studios in the country. But if you ask him, he'll tell you the real success wasn't the fame. It was the faith he built when nothing was working. God was silent, but he wasn't still, Perry said in an interview. He was doing something in me before he did something for me. Read that again. God was doing something in me before he did something for me. And maybe that's exactly what he's doing in your life right now. You might feel stuck. You might feel like your prayers are going nowhere. You might feel like God is a million miles away, but he's not. He's right there, watching over you, loving you, protecting you, even if you can't feel him right now. Silence is where trust grows the deepest. Let's not forget the story of Jesus and Lazarus. When Lazarus got sick, his sisters sent word to Jesus. They believed he would come immediately to heal him. But Jesus didn't come right away. In fact, he waited, and Lazarus died. Imagine how hurt and confused his family must have felt. Why didn't you come, Jesus? We believed in you. But 4 days later, Jesus showed up and raised Lazarus from the dead. Now think about that. If Jesus had come earlier, he would have healed Lazarus. But because he waited, he performed a miracle that revealed his power in a greater way. God's delay wasn't a denial. It was a setup for something greater. And the same could be true for you. The silence you're experiencing might just be the space God needs to create a miracle that's bigger than what you asked for. But it requires patience. It requires trust. And it requires faith when nothing makes sense. Don't give up in the silence. Don't let temporary darkness make you doubt the light that's coming. Because when God breaks the silence, it won't be a whisper. It will be a shout. A breakthrough, a restoration, and you'll look back and realize every tear, every sleepless night, every lonely moment, it all had a purpose. So if you're walking through the quiet today, remember this. You are not alone, you are not forgotten, and you are not done. God is not finished writing your story. He's just holding the pen in the quiet, preparing your next chapter. Part 3. Your detour is God's direction. Let me tell you something that might change the way you see your life. The roadblock you're facing right now might be the very thing saving you from a dead end. You know, we all have a picture in our heads of how life is supposed to go. Graduate from college. Get a great job. Fall in love. Get married, buy a house, start a family, live happily ever after. That's the dream, right? But what happens when life doesn't follow that path? What happens when you lose the job instead of getting promoted? What happens when the relationship you thought was forever suddenly ends? What happens when your plans fall apart and you feel completely lost? Most people panic. They break down. They start to believe that life is off track. But here's what they don't realize. Sometimes a detour is the only way to your true destination. Think about that. If God is leading you somewhere better, do you really think He'll always take the straight road? Not always. Sometimes He takes you the long way to protect you, to prepare you, and to show you things you would have missed otherwise. Let me tell you about Denzel Washington. Before becoming an Oscar-winning actor, Denzel dreamed of being a doctor. Acting wasn't even on his radar. He was just another college student with average grades and no real sense of direction. One day, he was sitting in his mom's beauty salon in Mount Vernon, New York, when an old woman looked at him and said something that changed everything. "Young man, you're going to travel the world and speak to millions of people." He had no clue what that meant. But fast forward, Denzel didn't become a doctor. He didn't follow the safe plan. Instead, he stepped onto a detour and ended up exactly where God wanted him to be. And that's the thing. The detour you're resisting might be the door God is opening. Let's take another story. Howard Schultz, the former CEO of Starbucks. Howard grew up in public housing in Brooklyn. He never imagined he'd one day lead a global brand. His childhood was filled with hardship. His father was a truck driver who got injured on the job and was never given benefits. Howard watched his family struggle, and at one point he said, "I didn't dream of coffee. I dreamed of escaping poverty." Ace. When he got older, he joined Starbucks when it was just a small chain with a few stores in Seattle. He didn't plan to stay long, but a trip to Italy changed everything. He saw how cafes there were places of connection, not just for drinking coffee, but for building community. That trip was the detour, and that detour became the turning point. He came back with a vision that transformed Starbucks into what it is today. A place where people don't just get coffee, but connection, comfort, and culture. So maybe you feel like your life has gone off track. Maybe you're in a city you didn't want to be in, working a job you never imagined, living a life that looks nothing like your dream. But what if that's not a mistake? What if it's divine positioning? Think about this. God's GPS doesn't break. You may feel lost, but He knows exactly where you are and where He's taking you. You don't have to understand the journey to trust the guide. Let's go deeper. Remember the story of Moses? He was born to lead, but he ended up in the desert for 40 years after killing an Egyptian. That was his detour, from the palace to the wilderness, from power to obscurity. But during those years, God was shaping his heart, breaking his pride, and preparing him to lead an entire nation out of slavery. Without the detour, Moses wouldn't have been ready. Without your detour, maybe you wouldn't be ready either. Sometimes God removes people from your life not to hurt you, but to heal you. Sometimes He shuts a door you were begging to walk through because He knows there's a fire on the other side. Sometimes He delays your dream because what you want isn't as great as what He has planned. And yeah, I know, detours are uncomfortable, they're confusing, they're lonely. But detours are where character is built, where patience is born, where faith is tested. And faith, my friend, is the bridge between your plan and God's promise. Here's something powerful to remember. Just because you don't recognize the path doesn't mean God hasn't paved it. Take a moment and think. How many times have you looked back and realized that something you once hated, something that felt like a disaster, actually turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to you? Maybe it was that breakup that led you to rediscover yourself. Maybe it was that job loss that pushed you toward your true calling. Maybe it was that rejection that revealed your real worth. The detour forced you to grow, and that growth made you better. So here's my message to you today. Stop trying to go back to the road you once knew. Stop fighting the change. Stop doubting your journey. Instead, start asking, God, what are you trying to teach me here? What strength are you building in me during this delay? Whose life will be touched because I stayed faithful, even when it didn't make sense? Because you have no idea what chapter is coming next. You don't know how your struggle today might save someone else tomorrow. You don't know how the detour might become your destiny. But God does. So trust Him. Walk forward. Don't look back. Because every twist every turn, every stop along the way. It's all part of the story. And when you finally arrive, you'll realize it was never a detour. It was direction. Part 4. Trusting God's timeline. Sometimes the hardest thing in life isn't doing something. It's waiting. Waiting for answers, waiting for healing, waiting for love, waiting for clarity. And in that waiting room of life, doubt loves to whisper in your ear. Maybe God forgot you. Maybe your story just won't work out. But here's a gentle truth. God's timing is never off. It's just different from ours. Think about the story of Sarah and Abraham. God promised them a child, but the years kept passing. No sign of a baby. Decades went by. Sarah laughed at the idea of becoming a mother at 90 years old. But guess what? Isaac was born right on God's schedule, not theirs. You may not be 90, but maybe you feel the same kind of frustration. You've worked hard, stayed faithful, done your best, but the breakthrough hasn't come yet. Maybe you see others winning, growing, marrying, succeeding, and you're wondering, God, what about me? That's where trusting God's timeline comes in. It's not passive waiting, it's active faith. Let's take a real-world example. In the U.S., Steve Carell, the actor we all know from The Office, didn't become truly famous until his 40s. For years, he worked behind the scenes, took small roles, kept going. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't untalented. He just hadn't reached his moment yet. When it came, it changed everything. What if he had quit in his 30s? What if he said, God, this is taking too long? We wouldn't know his name today. See, sometimes God is preparing you in the waiting. Sometimes he's building your strength, shaping your heart, or protecting you from something you don't even know is coming. Delay doesn't mean denial, it means development. Let's pause here and ask, what if the wait is part of the blessing? What if God is not saying no, but just not yet? In farming, there's a time to sow and a time to harvest. You can't rush the seasons. The seed doesn't grow faster because you want it to. But if you trust the process and care for it, eventually, life breaks through the soil. Your life works the same way. Maybe you're sowing right now, working hard, learning, healing, trusting, and the results feel invisible. But under the surface, things are moving. In God's timing, you'll see it. You'll feel it. You'll walk into it. Let me tell you something powerful. God is never late, and He's never in a hurry. His pace might frustrate you, but it's always purposeful. Imagine you're flying in a plane, and there's turbulence. You can't see the pilot. You don't know what buttons they're pressing, but you trust them. You believe they've flown this route before. You sit back and let them do their job. That's faith. That's trusting God's timeline. Maybe your story is still mid-flight. Maybe the clouds are thick and scary. But the pilot has a destination in mind, and he knows the safest way to get you there. There's also something freeing about letting go of your own schedule. So many people today are tied up in the idea of where I should be by now. By 25, I should be married. By 30, I should own a house. By 35, I should have kids, or a business, or 6 figures. Says who? Not God. God doesn't measure your worth on deadlines. He measures your heart, your faith, your obedience. Here's a question. Would you still trust Him if it took 5 more years? Would you still believe if your dream came true at 40, not 30? The truth is, it's not about how fast you get there. It's about who you become on the journey. So instead of stressing about when things will happen, start focusing on who you are becoming while you wait. Are you growing? Are you learning? Are you trusting? Remember, even when you don't see it, God is moving. He's aligning things behind the scenes. He's opening doors you haven't even knocked on yet. The best stories take time. They have tension, setbacks, lessons, growth, and then a breakthrough. Your life is a story God is writing. Don't rush the chapters. Some of the most beautiful pages haven't been turned yet. Part 5. God's plan is better than your dreams. You've probably heard it 100 times. Trust God's plan. But when life falls apart, when dreams shatter, and when nothing goes as expected, that phrase starts to sound like a distant echo. You begin to wonder, if God really has a plan for me, why does it hurt so much? Why is this happening? It's okay to ask these questions. It's okay to feel disappointed. But here's the truth. What you see as a disaster might actually be divine redirection. Let's talk about dreams. Everyone has them. You might dream of becoming successful in your career, finding the perfect relationship, traveling the world, or building a beautiful life. And there's nothing wrong with that. Dreams motivate us. They give us hope. But sometimes we become so attached to our dreams that we forget to ask, is this what God wants for me? Because what we dream might look good from the outside, but only God sees the whole picture. Only He knows what lies around the corner. There's a story about a young man named Alex. He worked hard all through college, got top grades, and landed his dream job at a major tech company in California. For a year, everything felt perfect. Until one day, the company laid off hundreds of employees. Alex was one of them. His dream job vanished in an instant. He was heartbroken, lost, and angry. He kept saying, God, I gave my best. Why would you take this from me? What Alex didn't know was that this setback would become the setup for something greater. During his time off, he started helping his cousin build a small startup. It began as a side hustle, but within 2 years, it turned into $1 million business. Today, Alex says losing his job was the best thing that ever happened to him because it wasn't the end of his dream, it was the beginning of God's dream for him. You see, God's plan often starts where your plan ends. That moment you feel like everything is falling apart might actually be the moment everything is falling into place. You thought you were heading toward success, but God was leading you toward significance. There's a difference. Success is about what you can achieve. Significance is about what God can do through you. Sometimes we settle for good, when God wants to give us great. But here's the catch: you need to be willing to let go. Let go of the timeline. Let go of the picture-perfect plan you had in your head. Let go of the need to control every detail. Because the more tightly you hold on to your plan, the harder it is to receive God's. Think about a kid holding a cheap plastic toy. It's scratched, broken, and barely working. But when you try to take it away to give them something better, they cry and resist. Why? Because they don't understand what you're trying to do. They don't see the better gift in your hand. That's exactly how we act with God. We cling to broken dreams, toxic relationships, missed opportunities, thinking we're losing everything while God is standing there with something far greater in His hand. His plan is never to harm you, but to prosper you. That doesn't mean it's always smooth or comfortable. Growth rarely is, but it means there's purpose in every detour. There's meaning in the waiting, and there's love in every no He gives you. You may feel like your dreams are delayed. Maybe you've been praying for years and nothing's changed. But what if the delay is not denial? What if the waiting season is preparing you for something you're not ready for yet? If you rush the process, you might miss the blessing. A cake taken out of the oven too early collapses. A flower forced to bloom too fast wilts. The same goes for your life. Think of Joseph in the Bible. He had big dreams as a teenager, literal ones. He dreamed of greatness, but ended up being betrayed by his brothers, sold as a slave and thrown into prison. For years, it seemed like his dream would never come true. But every step of that painful journey was part of God's bigger plan. In the end, Joseph didn't just rise to power, he saved a nation. What looked like failure was actually favor in disguise. So what about you? Are you willing to trust that God knows better than you? Are you brave enough to release your dream so He can hand you His? Because the truth is, His dream for you is so much bigger, deeper, and better than anything you could ever imagine. One day, you'll look back and say, I'm glad it didn't go my way. One day, the dots will connect. The tears will make sense. The heartbreak will feel worth it. Because God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't forget promises. And He certainly doesn't ignore faith. Your surrender is never in vain. So hold your dreams with open hands. Pray for God's will above your own. And when you feel lost, just remember, He's not finished writing your story yet. And the ending? It's going to be so much better than the one you dreamed of. Because God's plan is always better than your dreams. Maybe life didn't go as you planned, but don't worry. God's plan is always better. What feels like a delay or disappointment today might be the setup for something greater tomorrow. Just trust His timing. Let go, have faith, and believe. Your story isn't over yet. The best is still to come. If this touched your heart, like, share, and comment below. This is Mind-Blowing Motive, where you learn, grow, and get inspired in simple English. Don't forget to subscribe and stay motivated with us.